bonafide beats. Heavy hit splits, wild file style, freak flows fast, close chord dial, make links late at the 8 pass, make more papers.
Welcome back to the Deepwater Podcast, and today's episode is the Trigger Man. Today we're talking about quarterbacks, but we're not going to speculate on draft-eligible quarterbacks or a particular quarterback coming from the University of Alabama. Today is about the quarterbacks that are currently on the Dolphins roster. That means we're discussing Josh Rosen and Ryan Fitzpatrick. And in reality, we're going to frame this discussion around Josh Rosen because we all love Fitzmagic, but we're all waiting on Fitzmagic to fall off the cliff, which he has a history of doing. And we know that definitely at 37 years old, he is not the future of the Miami Dolphins. So what does that leave us with Josh Rosen? What do the Dolphins have in Josh Rosen? And what we're going to do is we're going to back away from the speculation for a little while, and we're going to go with what the organization is saying. What has Brian Flores consistently said about Josh Rosen? What has Chris Grier consistently said about Josh Rosen? And do we have any reason to not take them at their word? Let's start with Brian Flores. Brian Flores was asked about Josh Rosen specifically in December about whether or not Josh would ever start again before the season ended. And his reply was, from meetings to walkthroughs to all of the preparation, as a coaching staff, we're with them on a daily basis. And I think we have a good feel for what that is. Now, to answer your question, for Josh, the steps he's got to take, I think he's taking those steps. I think in due time, he'll get his opportunity. And that sounds consistent from everything that Brian Flores has said since the beginning of training camp, meaning he believes that Josh Rosen just wasn't ready to take over as a starter in the NFL. And have we seen that before? I remember back at a time when, regardless of where a quarterback was drafted, the expectation was that he sat for a year and developed and learned the NFL game. And I am a fan of this approach. As a matter of fact, are there any quarterbacks in recent history that we've seen that kind of approach being taken and it working out for the best for the quarterback? And that's the head coach. What does the general manager who traded for Josh Rosen have to say about the situation? He was asked in January about Josh Rosen, and Chris Grier said, Rosen is a young player that has some talent. For us going forward, knowing that we were going to have a lot of picks and money available in the future, it made sense for us to make that trade. We're happy that we made it. Josh has made huge strides like Coach Brian Flores has talked about, and it's been fun watching him grow. Nobody got to see it, but he did a tremendous job of growing. And it sounds like the general manager's perception of Josh Rosen mirrors the head coach's perception of Josh Rosen. And we didn't always have that kind of thing in Miami because there were varying opinions about Ryan Tannehill during his tenure in Miami. And remember, there is a saying that Joe Philbin wanted the Dolphins to draft a quarterback to compete with Ryan Tannehill. And the Dolphins front office balked at that approach. And I couldn't disagree more about the approach of not drafting competition for a quarterback. You do it at every other position except quarterback. And my thoughts, as well as some other organizations around the NFL and their approach to their quarterback situation, are well chronicled in part 2 of The Curious Case of Ryan Tannehill. Here's the link. Go back and watch that video and tell me if you agree or disagree with that approach. But what we're going to do right now is we're going to back away from subjective things and we're going to look at Josh Rosen with a clean slate. Who is Josh Rosen and what can we prove about Josh Rosen? Is there something about Josh Rosen's situation that's unique? Is there something holding Josh Rosen back? And I think in order to answer that question, we got to go all the way back to UCLA. Josh Rosen, between his time at UCLA and his first year in the NFL, had 5 offensive coordinators. Folks, that's a lot of turnover and that's a lot of transition because With each new coordinator, you get a new system and new terminology. And that's on top of the players that change around you. And 5 coordinators in 4 years is a lot. And that's before he got to Miami. I would imagine it's difficult for any player, much less a quarterback, with that much transition, because the moment you learn the terminology and you learn the theory behind the offense you're running, now you have to take that and you have to apply that on Sundays against a defense. So you have to know how to attack a particular style of defense using the strategy that you use. And I would imagine that's extremely difficult for a quarterback. Now, you compound that with the fact that Miami had an inexperienced offensive coordinator in his rookie season also. And there's problems that can add to compound the situation. So what I want to do is I want to objectively look at Josh Rosen. And let's go back to the NFL's opinion about Josh Rosen during the draft process on the NFL's website. And there's a quote on the screen, and it says that Josh Rosen's footwork and mechanics make him as pretty as a quarterback as you'll find in this year's draft. The biggest concern with Rosen is that his on-field success requires many elements to stay on schedule. That sounds like every other quarterback I've ever seen in my life. He lacks plus arm strength, so identifying coverage pre and post snap and throwing with anticipation takes on added importance. Rosen has the pocket poise, accuracy, and intelligence to become a good NFL starter, but he needs to be willing to take defenses give him more frequently. Rosen will need to quell concerns surrounding leadership and coachability early on in order to establish a strong first impression and get off his career on the right foot. And that's the subjective. Now, there could be, where there's smoke, there's fire, they usually say, but we're going to try to steer away from that and trust what our eyes tell us about Josh Rosen. And I'm going to focus in on the comment about the importance of reading coverages pre and post snap, which is very important for all quarterbacks. And I believe that is what Brian Flores has been alluding to about Josh Rosen from the beginning of camp. Did you know that Josh Rosen had never identified a Mike linebacker before he got to Miami? What else was he not learning in Arizona through all of that transition and playing behind that awful offensive line, which was actually worse than Miami's was last season? So let's frame the context around Josh Rosen. He just got to Miami. He's already had 5 offensive coordinators. His new offensive coordinator is inexperienced. And there's Ryan Fitzpatrick, the X Factor, the ultimate mentor to a young quarterback. And I think it's best that Josh Rosen did get an opportunity to play a few games and then sit the rest of the season behind Ryan Fitzpatrick to learn some of those quote unquote leadership qualities. And what we're going to do now is we're going to look at a little bit of footage on Josh Rosen. And I think looking at this footage, you'll be able to gain some perspective about Josh Rosen that is a little different than the national narrative about Josh Rosen. When you watch Josh Rosen play, what do you see? Do you see nice touches on deep throws? I see drop passes, and the Dolphins led the league in those. I see a guy that manages to step up in the pocket and is beginning to take what defenses give him. I see a young quarterback making young quarterback mistakes. But, man, that is a beautiful arm. That is a beautiful arm that Josh Rosen has. I see a guy that demonstrates a little bit more pocket awareness than I ever saw out of Ryan Tannehill in his time with the Miami Dolphins. I see a guy that gets through the wash and keeps his eyes downfield making plays. And I see a lot of potential when I look at Josh Rosen play. And that's with an objective eye and try to stay away from the speculation. I see a guy that keeps his eyes downfield, directs traffic, and puts balls in tight windows downfield fairly consistency, especially given the circumstances. And I see a guy that has a nice group of receivers to grow with going into the next season. I want to highlight a few plays when it comes to Josh Rosen. And we're going to start with a nice pass early in the first quarter against the Dallas Cowboys in the third game of the season, a game that Miami got blown out in. And what I see out of this play from Josh Rosen is I see a young guy developing, but I also see a lot of turmoil around him that's going to hinder his development. And what we have here is it's 3rd and 4, and the ball is on the 31-yard line in Dallas. And we're just going to go ahead and play this here. But what we're going to do is we're going to freeze it, give you a quick look at what the coverage is, because Dallas gave you a lot of cover 1 man. And cover 1 man can look a lot like cover 3. And you uncover that by putting someone in motion to try to give you an idea of what's going on. So we have a man in motion. Josh is going to recognize that it's man, and he's going to flip and get that ball out to Devontae Parker, who's in one-on-one man coverage, and the safety cannot get there. And I want you to watch this ball placement, because this is one thing that you cannot teach. You can't teach ball placement. And from the end zone cam, you see Josh pointing out the Mike linebacker, something he never did before he came to Miami, sending his man in motion, and he's going to keep his eyes upfield briefly, rotate his eyes over to Parker, and drop a dime down the field for a completion. You can't ask for much more than that. Let's take a look at another play here. Let's look at this completion to Nick O'Leary early in the first quarter in this Dallas game. And what strikes me about Josh Rosen once again is pocket awareness, okay? This pocket is going to collapse in front of him coming out of play action. He evades the pressure. He keeps his eyes downfield, and a nice flick of the wrist to O'Leary, who found the soft spot in the zone and sat down, and Josh hit him, okay? And that's development, okay? Let's look at this next play again. Here's the flea flicker. Where are his eyes? His eyes are downfield, directing traffic to a completion to Preston Williams. That's development. And let's look at one more play here when Preston Williams dropped a touchdown pass that would have tied the game 10-10 just before the half. And we're going to look at this from the game film. So it's 3rd and 4, the ball's on the 15-yard line. And you can see Dallas is giving this cover 1 can be confused for cover 3 look. And they did that consistently. That is old Seattle. Okay. Legion of Boom. The man's in motion. He recognizes that it's man coverage. He's got a one-on-one on the outside. And he's going to drop another dime on Preston Williams. Preston Williams has to complete that catch. Okay. Let's take a look at it from the end zone angle again. And you'll see he's directing traffic. Points out the Mike linebacker. The safety is shaded to the left side of the center, so he isolates Williams even more on the right-hand side, flips his hips, gets a nice ball out that's perfect and has to be completed. And you see this repeatedly on tape, okay? The arm talent is just undeniable. You can't coach this, okay? You can't. But it's not all roses. And this is young quarterback stuff right here. Situational awareness. Miami's down 17-10. There's 14 seconds left, and they're trying to drive to get in position for a field goal in this Chargers game. Okay? And you see the Chargers are giving this cover 2 look to Josh Rosen. Okay? And what they're going to do is they're going to morph into more of a cover 3 look, but you're going to see Isaiah Ford uncover quickly. The ball has got to come out. It's got to. And he's going to uncover quickly on this route. And Josh either needs to let that ball go to him because he's breaking open at the top of your screen, or he's got to carry this other receiver deep up the field with a throw that can only be out of bounds or somewhere where his receiver can get it. But the ball's got to come out due to the time element. And what he does is he hesitates and he doesn't trust his eyes, and he takes a bad sack and loses 4 yards in the process, okay? And we're going to take a look at this from the end zone cam, and I'm going to end up slowing it down to give you a better look at what's going on. Now, there's the look. The defense morphs. When his back foot hits, he needs to be getting this football out, and you're going to see it. He's going to pump fake. He's going to think about it, and he's not going to release it. And he's going to take a bad sack. That's young quarterback stuff. And it's young, inexperienced quarterback stuff because that is bad situational awareness on his part. But he's got to have a short memory. And this is the very next play. And it's 2nd and 14 because he lost that 4 yards taking that bad snap. And you see the Chargers, they either have a little bit of confusion or they're trying to confuse him with what they're doing. And Josh is just going to ignore all that and get a nice throw down into the sidelines where only Preston or Devontae Parker can catch it. And this is a nice throw. This is just a nice throw. There's no way around it. Take the snap, back foot hits, ball's got to come out. Now, remember my comments about Chad O'Shea being an inexperienced offensive coordinator? Sometimes when fans watch games, what they see is not exactly what's going on here. And you can see in this situation, it's 3rd and 12, you're backed up against your own goalpost, and you got to give your young quarterback some help here with your play call, okay? And I'm going to pause it right here so you can see that the Chargers are in this cover 2 look, and all these guys are back here protecting the sticks. So what do you need? You need either a draw play or a quick breaking route. And you're not going to see that play call out of Chad O'Shea here. What you're going to see is all of the routes being run are going beyond the sticks. Okay? And that's not fair to Josh. And he panics and scrambles out of the pocket and gets hit on the goal line rather than throw the ball away because he's a young, inexperienced quarterback. Enter Chan Gailey. And I think this was Brian Flores' thinking around this because Brian Flores wants to focus on the defensive side of the football. And one way to make that happen is to get an experienced coordinator in there. Now, I'm not going to ask you guys to take my opinion on this. What I'm going to do is back to back, I'm going to post the links to every Josh Rosen throw from his starts in this season. And I want you to go back and look at these throws for yourself. I want you to form your own opinions and not listen to the national narrative. Okay? And in looking at this roster situation with the quarterbacks, you remember those 4 buckets? Studs. Miami does not have any studs at quarterback. Incumbents or starters. Yes. And Ryan Fitzpatrick straddles that line between a starter and an incumbent. And what I have to list Josh Rosen as is a wild card. Because if I take Chris Greer and Brian Flores at their word that he's developing as a quarterback, then he's definitely an asset moving forward to this organization, whether that's through trade or if they draft a quarterback like Tua and Tua needs to sit half the season, or maybe he needs to sit the whole season. Or maybe Josh Rosen becomes that player you thought he was, and you have a luxury of having Tua, Rosen, and Fitzpatrick moving forward. Okay? And it's not absurd for a team to carry 3 quarterbacks on their roster. I remember Adam Gase absurdly carrying 4 quarterbacks on his roster for several weeks. Now, that was crazy, but carrying 3 for a season is not so crazy. So I believe Rosen returns and he's placed in a position to challenge for the starting position no matter who Miami brings in. And I think that's a good look for this organization moving forward, regardless of what happens in free agency in the draft. And that's going to do it for this episode, The Trigger Man. Now, coming up next, we're going to take a look at the wide receivers. Who are the targets for whoever this quarterback is going to be next season? I ask that you guys stay tuned and look out for the next podcast. And thanks for listening.
We got keys to the underground. Shemty. Killer Hurt. This for you. About to get sick with it. Exclusive. People. As quick as I can spit it, I'm sick with it. Survivor. You and yours. Riders, born pieces of shit, flip scripts just to get rich. In this rap world, I murder everything except track, y'all whack. A matter of fact, you never seen dead bodies, the aftermath of what I just did with my army. Deep with heat, lurking the outskirts, politic with